All right, we are just over 2 weeks away from the 2023 NFL Draft. John Schmeelk, Paul Dottino with you. It is Mock Draft City. They're everywhere. People are predicting, but this is when they do start to matter, and I'll explain why before we get into the players, Paul. Right here in this Giants building, the parking lot's really full when I show up at 8 o'clock in the morning every day. Why? The scouts are in the building, and they're having their pre-draft meetings, and that's happening everywhere around the league where boards are getting finalized. And when boards get finalized, stuff has a tendency to leak out of some of these buildings, and you might get some ideas of who teams are going to pick.
Not this building, though,
No,
John.
not this building.
And really, the other thing you have to keep in mind, this is where the assistant coaches have come back from all of their visits, and now they're comparing their notes with the scouts' reports, and some little tweaks are being made, or maybe secondary looks are being used because guys maybe didn't see things the same way.
Yeah, and coaches and scouts sometimes don't see things the same way. This is when you build what Joe Shane calls consensus in the room about who you're going to draft and who you like. And your 30 visits are happening now as well, where each team can have 30 players visit their facility, and that's happening around the league as well as teams finalize their boards. All right, let's get into the mock drafts. You go to the Godfather, Mel Kiper. He began this industry. He's still going strong over at ESPN. Round one, a new name, Paul, another cornerback, DJ Turner, cornerback out of Michigan. Not the biggest guy, but he ran a 4.26 40-yard dash at the combine.
John, I wonder if that time isn't what pushed Kiper to make him a first-round pick, because I don't think Turner's a first-round pick. Most people think he's a second-rounder. You have to look at him, and he's very wiry. There are length issues. There are sturdiness issues because of his frame.
He moves well, though.
The thing is, his quicks and his speed are off the charts. Turner's the kind of guy who, if you are just absolutely in love with speed and quicks, you're going to want him, and you're going to ignore some of the other issues.
He can play slot and outside as well. Round two, he is the Giants taking John Michael Schmidt, center out of Minnesota. Surprising he lasts this long, Paul. He's one of those two centers, him and Joe Tippmann, that are kind of at the top of this draft. John Michael Schmidt's in round two would be a very nice value.
Schmidt's spent over 4 years in college, 2 years as a starter. The thing about him, he's got this wrestling background, and you can see that because his technique and his fire is just off the charts. Had only one holding penalty during his entire college career. Think about how hard that is for a center at a major program to do. And that's the kind of guy we're talking about. Again, technique. He's really, really sharp and very smart.
Really good in outside zone as well. All right, Chad Ryder, our buddy, he did an interview on the Giants Huddle podcast earlier in the year. Make sure you go check that out. Just search for the Giants Huddle podcast on your favorite podcast platform. He did a 4-round mock, Paul, so we have some new names here. Round one, trade down with the Chiefs. Cam Smith, cornerback out of South Carolina. They have a couple cornerbacks coming out in this draft that could go on days 1 and 2. Here the Giants get Cam Smith. They're in a 4.43 40 in Indy.
Similar to Turner in that he's got really good speed, not quite the 4.2s, but he's got shadow skills. There's no question about that. And he's got a little more length than Turner does. But when I saw some inconsistent play and physicality was an issue for him, he's not a guy who's really going to want to mix it up very much.
Pick 2, pick 57, Joe Tippmann, the center out of Wisconsin. We talked about him ad nausea. A 6'6 center out of Wisconsin. Good, solid player. Wisconsin obviously knows how to develop offensive linemen. Pick number 3, Paul, with that trade down, the Giants picked up an additional third-round pick in this draft. Kayshon Boutte out of LSU, a big-time wide receiver who was a projected first-rounder before this year, was not as productive. He has him going to the Giants in round 3 here. And then Jamie Robinson, kind of a safety slot corner hybrid out of Florida State for their 2 third-round picks.
All right, I won't talk about Tippmann. We've done enough on him. But Boutte and Robinson are interesting. Boutte is a boomer bust pick. We've had our guests on throughout the course of Big Blue Kickoff Live recently, and even talking to the LSU guy, it was really simple. You either love him or you've got big-time question marks because of the ankle injury, because of focus issues.
And his testing wasn't very good either.
He did not do that well, but when you looked at his tape pre-injury, he was probably as good as any receiver in this draft.
Yeah, and he's a bigger guy, too, that can play outside.
Very physical. Very physical. And then finally about Robinson, if he wasn't listed at only 5'11", 191, if he had another 10 pounds and had another 2 inches, oh my goodness, he'd be a first-round pick, John, because he does everything, plays 4 positions. He's got a motor, he's got fire, he's got physicality. But the measurements just don't tell you to take him that high.
Could be a good replacement for Julian Love down the road if you get him at this point in the draft. Finally, round 4, Paul, real quick, Anthony Orji, the selection for the Giants, a linebacker.
4 years in school, and he's simply a football player. None of his measurements and none of his tests are going to blow you away. You're not going to be excited about any one thing he does. He's just a football player, one of those guys who's going to knock the snot out of you. And if you like that, that's what you want.
Based on your smile, I think you do.
I'm always one for old school football players.
He's Paul. I'm John. Thank you for joining us as we take a look at mock drafts. We got a couple more of these to go as we get ready for the draft in a couple of weeks.